Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the cartoonist behind the upcoming Oni Press graphic novel Cretaceous. It's Tadd Galusha, coming to you live from Anchorage, Alaska. Thanks for coming on, Tadd.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, we're going to be talking about Cretaceous, which is your new graphic novel that's coming out on March 13th from Oni Press here in a bit.
Yes.
But I want to talk about your path to comics and like how you approach art and everything like that. Because I think getting to know you a little bit before we get into Cretaceous will, it's good to get into those things.
Yeah.
When did you start reading? I know you started with Capwolf.
Oh, yeah.
Where did you start with comics? Was it Capwolf?
No, it was straight up Capwolf. We were visiting my grandmother when I was, I think, 6. So my sister had just been born. And we'd gone back to Nebraska, and a couple miles down the road, there was like one of those big, I think it was like pre-Walmart, might have been a Kmart or something. Anyways, they had comics there, and something about red, white, and blue and werewolves, man. I was hooked.
I have to say, it's funny because like Capwolf is something I think people make fun of to a certain degree.
Oh,
but
yeah.
The thing is, I actually went back and read it, and it is like such a uniquely comic book idea that really makes it work because it's kind of stupid. It's Captain America as a werewolf, but there's something about it that makes it really special.
Yeah, I think for me it was the perfect storm because I was really into like Universal monsters. I just kind of discovered those, and the Wolfman, and then I don't know. I was always like into G.I. Joe and all that kind of type of stuff when I was a kid. So like and then of course Wolverine I think was in.
But he was totally the same.
Yeah, he was totally the same.
Because he's already hairy and very wolf-like.
Right, he was just in it. And so he was interesting. He's always a good seller. I think Cable's in it too. There's they just threw in like all these cool characters and then werewolves and I don't know. I just hadn't, when you've never seen anything like that before, I think it doesn't matter how dumb and weird it is. It kind of like blows your mind. In
a weird way, though, I feel like that Capwolf storyline really kind of underlines the magic of comics because you can do anything. If you can do Capwolf, you can do anything in comics.
You can get it. It's on Amazon. I bought it last year.
Yeah, or it's on Marvel Limited. Just go and find it. It's amazing. So after Capwolf, you clearly had like an interest in comics, but from what I understand, you basically kind of didn't really read comics until college, formally, I guess.
Not formally. I had a box, but I only got Captain America.
You mean like a pull list?
Yeah, like a pull list. And there was only one comic shop that was close enough, but it was still 45 minutes away from our house. So, when you're a kid, getting your parents to drive in the direction that they drive for work,
right,
to go to a comic book shop isn't exactly something that's going to happen. So my parents, for Christmas or Easter or something, they would just go and clean out my box. So I'd get a nice little stack, pretty much every year I'd get 12 or I guess 13 issues because there'd be the annual. You remember they threw the annual in there? So I get 13 issues of Cap. And then, throughout the year, maybe I'd pick up an issue of Wolverine or an X-Men or a Hulk or something here or there. But it wasn't until college when I realized I didn't have a mind that was geared towards the animal sciences.
I like to think that was also inspired by Capwolf.
Probably. Over in Moscow, Idaho, there's a really, really good comic book shop. Safari Pearl. And that place just, again, just blew my mind. And that's when I discovered, I didn't realize, and at the time it was perfect because when I was in college, you had Sin City was coming out and, the X-Men movies were just coming. I think X2 had just come out. So, the superheroes and comics were very fresh in the, cultural zeitgeist. And, especially, Sin City, as much as I hate to admit it, I was when I saw the movie, I was like, what is this? Is unique.
It was definitely unique.
Yeah, it's very unique. And then I discovered the comic series and bought the whole collection at a used bookstore or something for whatever. And that was my introduction to Frank Miller. So all I knew was Marvel, DC, kind of comics. And then you go from that to Frank Miller's like Sin City, and it's like, oh shit, okay, comics is not what I thought they were.
Right.
Because I missed like the whole like Spawn thing. I don't know where I was for that. It's probably, I don't know, playing in the woods or something. I have no idea.
I do think I don't know. It's always interesting when people first discover the world outside like Marvel and DC. I mean, like in a way, Sin City is kind of Frank Miller is in the family of Marvel and DC. It's if you get Frank Miller, you're going to get those other ones. The first comic it was just straight up a DC comic, was Vertigo. But when I first read Preacher, man, that like changed the game for me because I had never read a comic like that before. It was very different than X-Men comics, that's for sure. I had been reading Bone. I really liked Bone, but I mean, that was like Peanuts meets Lord of the Rings. It's not exactly like trying to kill God with a vampire and, I don't even remember what Tulip was exactly. But anyways, it was crazy.
Right.
But those change your mentality on what you think comics are capable of.
Yeah. And then when I was reading Sin City, I started going back to my old Cap issues, and I realized, oh, hey, I have a whole bunch of this guy's early work from like 10, 15 years before he was doing this kind of stuff. And that's when it kind of started to click that, oh, hey, this is like something, this is like a profession.
This is what you could do.
People do this for a living. And so I was a fine arts student. I was like in my first year. And that's when I kind of made the decision, like, especially when you start looking at, no offense to any fine artists out there, but you start looking at these guys that like their entire life is doing like one study, or they have a period where they only draw like shapes, or they only do this, some kind of study, not to knock it. But to me, I was like, I want to be able to draw everything. So I'd go to the comic shop, Safari Pearl, and pick up something and be like, these guys can draw everything from a bike to a monster to a beautiful woman to, whatever you want. And that's when it was like, okay, I think I found the direction I need to go in. And, that's when I decided to like, okay, I'll start applying to some art schools, some comic schools, and see what there is, what I can afford.
Was a big part of the appeal of the art, was it like the narrative aspect to it, the fact it was storytelling rather than just, just shapes or like, whatever the hell Jackson Pollock was doing? Like, was that appealing to you?
Yeah, I always liked stories, and now when I look back, especially like the people, like my dad was always kind of a storyteller. He was always one of those guys that, whether it was bullshit or not, he was always telling some kind of tale of his youth or experiences or something. And I always liked that. And so, even when I was doing fine arts, all my projects that I had an option to potentially have to do my senior year at WSU. And I was already writing up like what I was going to do. And it was going to be like a sequential narrative, so it would just been a series of illustrations that told some bullshit existential story or something. I mean, I was 21.
Right.
We
had amazing ideas back then.
Oh, so
the best ideas.
Brilliant. I'd read Fight Club, and I thought I was just like, I was on the ball.
When did you? So you didn't really read comics like besides Captain America until college. When did the drawing start? Was that always something you were doing?
When I was really young, like first grade, I really struggled with school, and really struggled. And it wasn't until literally like a few years ago that I found out that I had some kind of like learning disability, which I was like, oh, that makes sense why stuff was hard. But because of that, luckily sometimes you get a good teacher that kind of lets you go towards your strengths, and my strength was always, even as a kid, was just drawing. So not that I was any good, because I didn't have any type of like training. You're just drawing, but I liked doing it, and I did it all the time just for fun. There's boxes back at my mom's house of just stupid monsters and stuff. Like I remember the superhero trading cards came out.
Oh yeah, I actually just bought a box of Marvel Universe Series 2 trading cards so I could open them with creators at Emerald City Comic Con to do interviews.
That's so awesome. So I had my Cap books, I had those, and then I had all my superheroes. But my favorite thing was on the back of I think it might have been I can't remember who made. Maybe it was Topps. But on the back they had the. Oh, was it? Okay. And they had the power ratings.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Which sometimes would irk me because some of my favorite...
Like, this is clearly ridiculous.
Yeah. I was like, Captain America is not a 2 in strength. This is bullshit. I've seen this dude like flip over a truck. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
He's way stronger than that. Yeah, and so I used to draw those, and just make weird, ridiculous superheroes out of, they were obviously just rip-offs. Like I remember I did one that was like it was called like Iron Iguana,
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah, so you get it? Yeah. And like, I think his strength level was like 20 gazillion, just crazy, like just off the charts.
I've always had an extreme affinity for the Celestials because I don't know if you remember this, but they just said like not applicable on the power ratings because they were just so strong. And I was just like, how is this possible?
Yeah,
how
like,
have they broken the ratings?
They're like gods.
This is insane. Yeah, no, I actually did an article about those where I talked to the people who made them. And I was very upset to find out that in the Series 1 where they had like the fight statistics, those numbers were made up, which makes total sense. They're like, we're not going to go back and count all the fights and how many they won and lost. And I was like, I guess that makes sense. But in my childlike brain, Dazzler was amazing at fighting because she won like 75% of her fights.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you took those statistics to heart. That's why it was always like really frustrating when you had like a really like,
this is an outlier. This is wrong.
Yeah, this is completely wrong. I don't know who wrote this. This is bullshit. I know that this is wrong. Wolverine is not a 4 in strength. God damn it. Yeah.
So how did you get from Iron Iguana to getting into the Kubert School?
Well, so in high school, I took a lot of art classes in high school, and as a way of the teacher, shout out to Beverly Schatz wherever you are. She
huge off-panel listener.
Yeah, she actually was I think she was from Brooklyn, but she was teaching at our high school, but that was kind of like her retirement gig. So before that, she had worked for like 20 years as like a what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, as like a professional like in-house studio artist, mostly doing like pay steps and mechanics, meaning like old school like lettering and stuff like that, like like layouts for magazines. But and so she was all like, oh, you need to go to New York, that's where the art schools are. And I'm like, nah, I'm not interested. But I used to do gigs for her for the town, because our town would, the Board of Commerce, whatever, would commission her to do logos for like the new seal, or like one time I had to do like a mural painting downtown for her. And that's how I got my art grades. I never did any assignments. I don't think I did a single assignment for her.
That's awesome.
She would just have me do work that she was like, I don't have time for this shit. I'm teaching kids that don't want to be here. She was your first for exposure employer. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So that was my first foray into the world of commercial art, small town commercial art.
But did she have connections?
No, she just knew that, like, she sees a kid that has, like, I guess, who has an affinity for art, and is like, you should pursue this. And meanwhile, I'm like, what am I gonna do with art? Because I don't know any artists. I've never met an artist besides her, but I just know her as like the high school teacher. I didn't want to teach high school, so the whole thing was kind of like, I need to go to college for science or business, something where I can make a living for myself. And so I got in my mind like, I like animals, wildlife, all that stuff. I want to be, some type of veterinarian or zoologist or something like that. And then, but she was the one who told me about the Kubert School. So in high school, she was like, hey, I've got this book, look at this book. And it was a Kubert School. And I looked at it, and then I just kind of forgot about it. And then that summer break in between freshman year of college, after I changed my major to fine arts, I ran into her actually on the street. And I told her that what I was doing, I'd gone to fine arts. And she was like, you should look into the Kubert School. New York is still calling.
Yeah.
Y'all go to New York, which turned out Kubert School was in New Jersey.
Right.
So not quite as fancy.
Yeah.
But so I applied there, and I think it was my junior year. I realized like, I can't. I've outgrown whatever the art department.
It's not the direction for you.
Right. They didn't have anything to offer me really. And so I applied to there, and there's a place in Connecticut, and I think I applied to a place. Was it Pratt? Is that the big school in New York? I can't remember. There's a bunch of schools, and Savannah School.
Yeah. SCAD.
I got in there. I got into all of them, and then I looked at the price points, and I was like, oh, wow. For what it would cost to do 1 year at any of these schools, I can do all 3 years at the Kubert School.
Yeah.
So I went to the Kubert School. Now, the downside is you don't walk out with a bachelor's.
Right.
But I didn't also walk out in crippling debt.
Right.
So,
which is good.
which is great. Yeah.
What was so the Kubert School? I don't want to go too far into that, but like,
Sure.
What was your like big takeaways from that in like how you should approach your art and like how you should, I don't know, build a career in comics?
You know, oh man, that's such a good question because there's so many different ways you can answer it.
Right.
I guess my biggest takeaways was just emphasize on storytelling,
Right.
and just you have to grind. You have to, because I wasn't that good. I knew I wasn't that good. Maybe I had some potential, but like there was kids in my class that were that are way better than me, way more skilled, but not to, like I knew that like when we were in second year, none of them were going on Craigslist and trying to get, like, I was working jobs as an artist while I was going to school pretty much the entire time. They were shit jobs, but I was gaining experience. Like I worked for like an MMA company. Like
Right.
they did like, like I did all their like t-shirts and flags and all that kind of stuff because they
Like tap out.
It was very much like tap. Or remember those Affliction shirts?
Oh yeah, Affliction.
It was
they
like
always
that-
look like metal covers.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
like that kind of crap.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was a horrible company, but I did like that.
Yeah,
I even
that's work.
did like a short comic for a guy. Yeah, I did all kinds of stuff like that, and yeah, and so that right there, I was seeing like, oh, okay, I'm not even graduated, and I can make, over the summer, I can make an extra $2,000. I can make,
Right.
a little. It's not that much money. It only covers maybe a month worth of bills, but like, where am I going to be in 5 years, 10 years?
Well, I've said on the podcast before, like this isn't. This is just my takeaway from talking to a lot of artists, but it's like one of the greatest abilities you can have as an artist is reliability.
Yeah.
It's like having the ability to show that you can put out the pages or you can do the work or whatever. That is worth. Being talented is important, of course, but reliability is super important. It's an underrated aspect.
Yeah, and like talent's one of those words that I hate.
It's also relative.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things because when you get into anything, doesn't matter, sport, an art, anything, you get to a point where everybody's talented.
Right.
It just comes down to like who is perfecting their craft the most, meaning who's spending more time with their butt in the seat. Now there's gonna be those outliers, those freaks that are just amazing.
They're
You're like,
good at everything.
I'm never gonna catch that guy. Like, good luck to you.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
You're the greatest. But I've found that the difference between the people who make it post, like, here you go, kids. School is the easy part. Don't take a break when school ends. That's when you're supposed to like put on your big boy britches
And get going.
and get after it. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what I did. Where like I had
Wait,
friends.
you got after it or you took a break?
No, I didn't take a break.
Okay.
Like a lot of people I knew took breaks. Like, I'm going to take the summer off, and I was like, okay. Where like the day we graduated school, my wife and I packed up the rig and we drove back out to Portland. And that week I was like, I had an interview with Dark Horse, which didn't go anywhere because I wasn't, I didn't have any skills. But they told me about some internships in the city, and I had no idea they even existed because nobody told me about them, nothing like that. And and that's how I ended up like
At Heliscope?
Yeah, doing the internship and, meeting people like Ron Randall and Steve Lieber and Parker and, Jonathan Case. Jonathan Case was actually the first person I actually met because I emailed him before I even did the interview, just because he was working on, it used to be called Sea Freak. I don't remember what it ended up being released as. It was like his first book. But anyways, he was just releasing it as like these like photocopies, like chapters.
Oh, nice.
And so I was like, hey, can I buy those? And he just sent them to me. He
That's
sent me,
awesome.
like 3 chapters of this thing, and then I see his work, and his work's like,
Jonathan is stupid amazing.
stupid amazing. And I was like, what is this?
I feel like he is a super underrated artist. I don't know. I mean, like, they just re-released Green River Killer. Like, everything that guy has done is good.
Oh, he's always been amazing. Like, I don't understand. He's one of those guys where maybe he's had the opportunity. I don't understand. I'm amazed that Marvel or DC haven't tried to like lock him down on like, get one of those contract gigs where like, all right, we're paying you X amount of money per year, whether you're working or not, just so we make sure that nobody else takes you from us, because he's just that good.
I remember when he did Batman 66, I thought that was kind of like the beginning for it. But at the same time, I mean, I'm trying to remember, what was that graphic novel he came out with a couple years ago that was really good? I don't know. I mean, I feel like...
He did that Disney book for like World of Tomorrow or something. I can't remember what it was called.
Sure. But he had a graphic novel that was about like a hotel, and I'm not even gonna get into it. Oh,
that's right.
Yeah. It was a really good book. It was set in like the 1920s, and it was like very stylistically like right up his alley because he's got an elegance to his art that he's very good at.
Oh yeah.
Anyways, but it's funny. I actually was thinking that your Heliscope connection was going to come from the Kubert School because Steve Lieber went there.
I think that's probably the only reason why I got the internship.
They're like, you do art? Wait, you went to the Kubert School? Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. Steve was a big. He's always been, I think, my biggest advocate. And even like when I interviewed, like I wasn't exactly like clearing the room with like my talent, put it that way. But the one thing I had going was storytelling, and that's what he called out. And he said, well, we're going to have you come in. Mm-hmm. So luckily I had enough money saved up where I could do the internship. Because at the time, I don't know what the internship's like now, but at the time it was like 5 days a week, from 10 to 6 or 10 to 7. And, you're there doing whatever you're, working on your stuff. And then if somebody needs, whether it's coffee or photocopies, or I mailed a lot of crap for people. I mailed a lot of shit.
You might have mailed stuff to me. You don't even know it.
Probably, yeah. It was. It was an interesting experience. It wasn't quite because I'd worked in a studio. Joe Kubert's studio I think they still have it. It's called Telegraphics. They do like PS Magazine. It's an army comic about like how to like change the tire on a Humvee and how to clean sand out of your M16, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And so I worked on that. So I was really thinking it was going to be that kind of setting where we come in there and we have like an editor in chief, and then like
kind of like an old school comic publisher.
Yeah. And it wasn't like that at all. It was like a collective, and most of the artists were a little bit older than me, and I didn't even know that there were web comics. I didn't even know about that, and everyone was doing web comics at the time, and everyone was I'd never even seen a Cintiq before, and they were all using those because Kubert School was at the time they're updated now, but when I went there,
traditional.
It was very traditional. They were in like a transitioning period where they knew they needed to start modernizing, but like they were still teaching us how to do like old school paste up and mechanics, like how to make an ash can using a photocopier and stuff like that.
I kind of feel like there's value to that though. Like being able to know all these different things, not necessarily you're going to use it, but it's good to have that skill set if need.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a great skill. You'll never use it unless like the entire grid goes down. But, like we had for 3 years, we had traditional lettering under High Eisman. And if people don't know who High Eisman is, look him up, damn it. He's amazing. He's been doing Popeye for the last decade or something, maybe longer. And and he taught traditional lettering, which I found out later, like that's what the Kubert boys, that's how they started their careers. They were lettering.
I didn't know that.
Adam Kubert, he lettered Heavy Metal Magazine for like years. Even when he was working like, he was like the big new guy on the scene for Marvel doing like X-Men and Wolverine and all that stuff. He was still lettering.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I asked him one time, I was like, why were you doing that? Like, I was like, you're making crazy money in the like that 90s boom. And he's like, yeah, but the lettering was consistent. I was like, that's probably the wisest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
All right.
It's good to have a gig. I mean, that's that's one of the things I talk to our artists about a lot. It's like a lot of them are afraid of saying no because you don't know when the next yes is going to come.
Oh yeah, that's my biggest fear. I got in probably a little trouble this last year where I said yes to way too many things.
And you're killing yourself.
I don't even think I went outside this whole summer. Which is a shame because we live in Alaska.
Right, right. Yeah. Alaska has very nice summers. Winters, not so much.
Right.
So I do want to ask about like how what you were first doing when you started getting comics, because I know we've talked about it before, and we're not going to be able to really get into specifics, but like you did like backgrounds and like assists and stuff like that people don't really know about. Like, was that what you first started with and kind of moved on forward with? When did you?
My first gig was actually I got hired by a film studio because I couldn't get any work, and I was doing storyboards. And then about 6 months later, out of the blue, because while I was interning, I had done a little bit of work, but I started, some artists had troubles hitting deadlines. And so they hired me to do backgrounds, or as they used to call way back in the old timey days, ghosting. I don't know if people still do it, but like you figure when guys like Frazetta and stuff were coming up, that's what you did. You went and worked at a studio that was usually headlined by some big artist who'd have some big contract with like a big, EC Comics or something, and you would draw, you'd draw backgrounds. You'd sharpen your claws, so to speak, as like an understudy. And so there was like a 4 or 5 years where that's what I did in Portland. Like that was like a huge chunk of my living. And I learned a ton because I'm working with artists who have, anywhere from 5 to 25 years of experience.
Right.
And, you get to see their process. And like, I was a madman. The thing that I think made me very implorable for the Portland region is I was one of the few artists who had wheels. I had a car. And I don't sleep. So I would go over to an artist's house and pick up pages at 11:30 at night.
Yeah.
And then, I'd stay up all night because I wanted to impress. That's what you got to do when you're young and when you're in your 20s and you want to get it. I'd turn around those pages and like, it'd be like 8 pages or something. I'd turn around by the end of the next day. And so I'd be going back to their house at 10 o'clock the next night or 2 nights later. They'd go over them, look at them, maybe have a fresh batch of pages for me. Or they just go, yep, good. And then I'd go and ink them. And you get a page rate. You essentially are working with an editor, and it's like an editor, art director all in one. So you're getting you're getting critiques that matter. The type of critiques where if you're fucking up, can I say that?
Yeah.
Okay. If you're fucking up, you're gonna get fired. They're just not gonna hire you anymore. And that's kind of how Telegraphics was. That for that PS magazine. If you couldn't cut it, they just clean out your shit. You're gone. We don't. It's a limited budget. We don't have time. We don't want to waste time with you because we have to redraw everything.
So what do you learn from something like that? From like doing the backgrounds and the ghosting and everything? You learn.
Well, one, you get tasked with drawing things you
don't want to draw most of the time.
Right. Like,
there's a reason why it's being passed off to you.
Right. You're drawing cars and tanks, crowds, like tiny crowds. So you're not even getting to draw like people.
Right.
You're just drawing like
the faceless masses.
Right. Exactly. Landscapes, which a lot of times, you're going off of nothing but like a horizon line and then some notes that the artist wrote for you and like a loose sketch, maybe. You're like, this is mountains, this blob right here. Make that a 1976 convertible of some kind. Okay, I can do that, and, you have to draw somewhat in that artist style. Yeah. If it doesn't look like it's that artist, people are going to notice. And, So
it seems like it kind of encourages versatility.
It encourages versatility, encourages you to hit deadlines, encourages you to get better. Nothing will make you improve like the fear of not being able to pay your rent.
Right.
And that is, some people are maybe chill enough to be like, I don't care.
Right.
And it's not a gig for everybody. It's a very old school method. Most artists I know that are around our age did not come up this way. They did their webcomic or they did their thing until finally it picked up enough steam and they were able to, do this and do that. But
every breaking in story is different though. And it is, true. Sometimes like if you get a foothold because you're ghosting people, the interesting thing is I don't think that a lot of people, obviously a lot of people who read comics don't even realize who's writing or drawing it, let alone who's doing backgrounds. But at the same time, I don't even know if a lot of people who are kind of connected or like people in my position know that this type of thing is happening. Because, how many times did you even earn a credit for that?
only once, and that's when Dark Horse actually hired me because they heard of because my reputation had kind of filtered around the Portland area, and Dark Horse was like, okay, we got a book that's like 9 months behind our deadline. We need to get this caught up. So they brought me in, and which was really because I hadn't really worked on anything big before. I mean, I'd worked on like DC and Marvel books, but just as a background artist or just as a ghost or something,
Right.
like, so it wasn't. And now all of a sudden, like they're bringing you in and they're like, all right, this is what we need you to do. And then they'd never hired someone like that, at least in probably the last, who knows, decade.
Right.
So they're like, they look at me and go, so how do we do this? What's the process? And I was like,
I don't know. You guys
I
gotta
take the floor with the editor in chief here and like explain to everybody like how we're gonna do this. Like it was really I don't know, like it was really intimidating because
I've been like double my page rate. I'm writing also now.
Well,
let's do this.
I did get for what I did. They did do that, and that was on them. They were like, yeah, no problem.
That's nice.
Yeah, like what I had to do was very minimal. I didn't have to ink, put it that way, which was pretty amazing.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Yo, everybody. I'd like to take a minute to talk about our sponsors over at Impact Theory Comics. Impact Theory Comics is a new independent publisher, and they're releasing their first comic, Neon Future. Neon Future is a collaboration with world-famous DJ and producer Steve Aoki, and is written by the Eisner Award-winning writer of Justice, Jim Kruger, with artists Neil Edwards of Fantastic Four fame and Jeremy Rappak delivering the visuals and building the world. Want a first look at the book and Neil and Jeremy's art? Give Impact Theory a follow on Instagram at IT Comics. If you like what you see and you're a fan of science fiction, this might be the comic for you. So head over to your local comic book shop and get Neon Future #1 on your pull list ASAP. And now, back to the show.
So basically, you did the Bubba Hotep book.
I just did that. Yeah.
Was it TMNT and Ghostbusters?
TMNT Ghostbusters. I'm trying to think. I did an issue like Jungle Jim, if anybody's ever heard of that. I did 2 issues of Dream Thief for Dark Horse. The background gig I was talking about for Dark Horse was something of Babylon. I can't even remember the name of it.
Ah.
And then I've worked on a bunch of like a few Kickstarter projects. I did quite a bit of cover work.
Mm-hmm.
That was like the first stuff that I got hired for, was to do cover work.
I know you've done like other illustration jobs, and you've done like some storyboarding and things like that.
Lots of storyboarding.
So what obviously probably the pay and the time doesn't necessarily work out in the favor of comics. Why
God, no. No.
So why do you...
If you want to make money, don't be a comic book artist.
Why do you keep coming back to comics?
That is a really good question.
I'm not trying to make you depressed or something.
No, it's something that, you ask yourself. I think it's just something about it's something about just the format and the genre. And if you're working on the right story, or you're working with the right people,
mm-hmm.
and everything's clicking, you can't really beat it. Where you don't really, it's like, as long as you're making enough to pay for the bare minimum, it seems like it's fulfilling, at least for me.
Yeah.
Now, there have been times in my life where I was like, fuck this shit. I need to get a storyboarding gig because
you need to pay the bills.
Yeah. And like, and storyboarding, at least as a freelancer, can be very, very lucrative.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually like smash and grab. Like you got to do a 24-hour turnaround or something. So, back when I was in Portland, I had a few storyboarding gigs where like I did one where I had to be up for like 3 days straight just because the amount of work they wanted was just ungodly.
Mm-hmm.
And it was under a tight deadline. But, when you're young, you can get away with that. And if you say no, you're in Portland, so it's like Mecca. There's like 20 other guys that will take the position in 20 seconds, So I unfortunately, I think early in my career, one of the big mistakes I made was I spent a lot of time being the guy that, like, if you need something turned around quickly, he'll do it. If nobody, I used to get a lot of jobs that no one else wanted to do because they'd look at him and go, ugh, that's going to be hard, and that deadline really sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, give it to Tadd. He'll do it.
And once that's your rep, it's kind of hard to get out of it.
Yeah. Lieber actually, when I did that issue of Jungle Gym, we had about a week turnaround.
Oof.
We had about 5 days, and I negotiated for, hey, I'm going to turn this in like super late Friday night. It's Monday right now. You guys won't be in the studio. You guys won't be in the office. Can I please turn it in Monday morning? It's not, that gives me 2 extra days. And they went, yeah, I guess. And because I was like, they're not, once they go home, they're not checking their inbox.
Right.
They're crazy. And yeah, we got it done. But after I did it, I mean, like,
Was that 20 pages or how much
it
was
was 22 pages.
22 pages. Wow.
22 pages.
So about 3 pages a day. A little bit more than 3 pages.
Yeah,
a day.
yeah. And it was like one of my first books. So I wasn't like, I wanted it to be legible.
Right.
And it was for what we did. I think for the amount of time and what we did, it was good. Luckily, I had layouts were done by Sandy Jarrell, who's a
nice.
super talented guy. But you know, it was like a serious grind. And I remember when I finished it, Lieber was like, he goes, "Don't be this guy." And I go, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Don't be the guy that." I know you want to get stuff out there, but you don't want to be the guy that this is the stuff they're coming to you with, because if they know that there's someone that will do it, they'll keep coming.
Mm-hmm.
And part of me was like, oh, great. And now at this age, I'm like, oh God, that was the best advice ever. Cause I mean, not that I've ever really said no to a project. But yeah,
I mean, it's tough because you're trying to balance out that desire to not say no.
Yeah.
With B, your desire to get paid.
Yeah.
But then also, I mean, there's certainly a part of you that wants to make a good comic and wants to make it under like a desirable time frame that isn't going to murder you.
Yeah.
And that's tough because it's like, how do you check all those boxes, especially as you're the person who's trying to break in?
I think there's only one guy I've seen that's able to just put in time and time again, just ungodly hours, and I think he enjoys every second of it, and that's Dustin Weaver. We were talking about him earlier, just because he's from this neck of the woods, and that guy's my hero. When I watch him work, I'm just, I know I don't have that level of, I want to have that level of dedication,
right?
But I just can't. I physically just start breaking down. I can't do it.
You stayed up for 3 days straight. I tried doing that in high school for an AP psychology sleep deprivation thing.
Yeah.
I didn't even last 3 days. I lasted I don't remember, 5 hours less than 3 days. I was a lunatic at the end of it.
That was my whole 20s.
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as I got out of the Kubert School and was able to get work, I mean, I'd probably pulled 3 all-nighters a week on average.
Yeah. My wife's an architect.
She knows.
Yeah,
She's
she
been
went
there.
to studio. They would be up for 5 days in a row, and just my college experience was way different. Unless it involved drinking and sleeping the next day,
right.
I wasn't up for very long.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I always admired people, whether it was in sports or anything. I always admired guys that I love that blue collar mentality. The guys that just I don't fuck it, it's gotta be done. We're gonna build it. We're gonna whatever. We're gonna do it. We're gonna get from point A to point B, even if it kills us. And I always liked that mentality. And I think I was able to do it up until I hit about, probably 2 years ago. And then I used them all up. I think it might have been Lieber again who said, you only have so many all-nighters. And I pretty much burned through my all-nighters all through my 20s, where now I'm, this last summer, I had to do all-nighters. And I just, because I had so many projects going and I was trying to I wanted to do a good job. Like you said, you want to do a good job and everything. But, I mean,
finding that balance is tough. It's tough for everybody. It's tough. It's tough for the longest running pros. I mean, I imagine Alex Ross is somewhere painting and falling asleep or something. Maybe not. He doesn't have to do interiors anymore. But
I mean, if I was getting paid Alex Ross rates, I wouldn't mind. I'll sleep when I'm dead. But I'm not. Yeah. And that's the thing, it's weird. Money is a massive motivator,
Right.
If somebody's offering you where you're like, whoa, I can do 2 days worth of work. So stay up for 48 hours and I've got 2 months worth of bills paid for. I'm doing that 48 hours. And I'm doing that even now. I know it'll kill me. I'll go buy a 12-pack of Monster and grind it out.
God.
That's what you gotta do, man.
Man,
it sucks.
My all-nighters are staying up till 11:37 now. And then I sleep as long as humanly possible because I'm an old person.
Who's probably one of the hardest working people I've ever seen operate besides Dustin Weaver, Joelle Jones.
Oh, sure.
Oh, I don't know how she gets all this work done, but I mean, she just, I mean,
I remember when that Catwoman book was announced that she's doing, and it was like she was writing and drawing it, and like most people, I'd be like, I don't know if this is a good idea, but for her, I was like, yeah, she can do that.
Yeah, I mean, she did it on that Dark Horse series.
Lady Killer.
Lady Killer, yeah.
Well, wasn't Jamie Rich involved? And he was like,
I thought he was the editor.
Technically, the writer.
Oh, was he?
Maybe I don't know. I think they both were like co-writing or something. I don't know.
I got the pleasure of, again, in Heliscope, getting to work next to her a little bit here and there, and yeah, just again, there's certain people. There's a reason why they're as successful as they are, and it comes down to their
talent and that effort. There's like a balance there.
It's the work ethic. Yeah. It's the work ethic. You know, because like if you put in that kind of work, you're gonna get good.
Joelle's also really talented.
Oh yeah. I'm not diminishing.
I know that.
I'm saying is like you're putting so much practice down. So like even if everybody's the same, say everybody starts off like we all get out of our school and we're all like equally talented.
Right.
The person who's okay, you're doing 2 hours a day, right, of drawing. And then the other person is doing 10 hours of drawing.
Right.
And then the third person is doing 20 hours of drawing a day. At the end of the week, who is going to progress the furthest? And it sounds weird, but I always find it's the person with the 20 hours because they're getting even.
But they're also dead now because
they
that's
might be
so
dead,
much.
But yeah, and maybe that's not. You got to slow down. But when you're young, you know, or just
I get it. Yeah.
You look at the people. It's all about getting the reps in because you're having to think, and it becomes routine. So like working out anatomy, working out perspective. I don't. You know, a lot of times I don't have to think about where my horizon line is. I can just boom. You plot out, and I don't have. You know, where back when when you're young, starting out, you have to like work out the grid, and you're doing all this stuff. I know you can cheat using computers now, but like, you know, there's a lot of people that just fudge all that stuff now because they've done it so many times.
I think it's funny that you said computers are cheating. It's helpful. Are you still traditional completely?
No, I use both.
Okay.
You have to, because the expectations of today of like that ambulance has to look exactly like an ambulance. Like if it's a little wonky, they're like, you can't draw. And I'm like, oh, okay. Have you tried drawing an ambulance? Like, fuck you, man. Yeah. I was getting a debate with like some of these artists. I have a few friend artists who are quite a bit younger than me, you know, like 25, 26. And you start showing them older stuff, you know, like classic guys from like the 70s and 60s. And they're like, ugh, look at all their stuff's all wonky. And I'm like,
that's a feature.
Yeah, I'm like, hold up. I'm like, one, their deadlines are way tighter than the deadlines we have. Two, they didn't have Google. They didn't have Blue Line. They didn't have computers. You couldn't do certain tricks of the trade where to make your cars or to make your perspective look perfect. They had to just go, you know. And I mean, like Kirby at one point, what was he doing? Like 9 books a month?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and it was all like the Marvel's main roster, you know.
Right.
It's like, come on, man.
Yeah.
It's like he did more in a month than most people do in a year.
Yeah,
like, that's crazy.
Yeah,
that's crazy. Of course, it's going to be a little wonky, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, I really do think that's kind of a feature. I mean, it's like there's more. I mean, I have no problem with the person using a computer or whatever.
Oh,
I think that whatever is it's kind of like shooting a jump shot in basketball is what I always say. It's like, as long as it feels right for you and it works for what you're trying to do, that's what you should do. Kirby was a maniac and just did a lot of stuff and was but I mean, it worked for what he wanted to do and what he was trying to do.
I mean, you know, maybe it's because I came from the Kubert School, and you know they're big on like, you know, like the traditional anatomy lesson. You know, like you know, working it out on the page. Where there's a lot of comics, and I think this I'm not like revealing any big secret that it's a trace of spades out there. Some of these books, and you know, when you're an artist, you can tell. You can tell which guys are literally just tracing photos, and not good for them. They're getting work, but there's a part of me that I'm like, no. Don't get me wrong. Like sometimes I'll have to do that because you got to hit deadlines, but I'm not gonna like it. I don't want to just see a photo just superimposed on on the panel. And you get comics that are like that, and I don't know. They look stiff and look boring. Like I like, utilize Google, utilize Photoshop, Clip Studio, utilize all what technology has to offer. But then look at like guys. Stuart Eminem's a great example. Things are very technically accurate. Like if he draws a tank, it looks just like that tank needs to draw. But it's not dead. It's got like some life to it. There's line weights. It's not just a dead line silhouetting the thing.
I don't know if he's capable of drawing something without life. It's just there's something about him that is there's just like always so much energy to his stuff.
Yeah. I mean, So I think you should use the total everything that's at total tool set that's at your fingertips. But definitely there's certain aspects of it where, as artists, I think sometimes we can get a little burnt out and get a little lazy and like go to, this is easy. I'll just do this. I'll just do that.
Yeah.
But look at like we were talking, like look at Dustin Weaver, look at Joel. I mean, there's no laziness there. I mean, that's why their stuff is super kick ass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's some of the best work out there,
So let's talk about Cretaceous.
Okay.
It's your new book that's coming out March 13th from Oni Press.
Yes.
It is. It's kind of interesting. It's like trying to explain it. It is largely about a father Tyrannosaurus Rex trying to find.
Well, wait.
What?
We never specified the animal sex.
That's true. Okay.
So it's
trying to find a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
It was a father. It was a father figure.
There we go. A Tyrannosaurus Rex is trying to find their remaining family member after tragedy strikes. But it's also the thing I really liked about it. This is kind of a weird comparison, but in like movies, like have you ever seen Children of Men?
Yeah.
So there's like that 15-minute tracking shot that follows through like the entire, like there's this, it just follows along one shot where it follows like Clive Owen trying to get the girl back and then depart from this building. It's all just one shot following them along. In like Cretaceous isn't a tracking shot, but it's kind of like moving from one place in like the prehistoric realm to another, connecting all these different life forms and showing kind of how like life worked back then.
Sure.
That was one of my favorite parts about it, was the fact that you didn't just focus on this single storyline. You kind of focused on it, but also touched on areas around it and always brought it back. There was a nice like path to it that worked really well. So
I'm so glad you said that, because I was definitely trying to do that.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
So where did this book come from? Like, how did it first come together?
Well, the first time I had an idea for something like this was at the Kubert School, because Steve Bissett, he graduated in the very first class, and he did a book called Tyrant that he just did a few issues and then abandoned, because it was kind of like this. It was all indie. But he didn't, I think self-published it. He didn't have like an actual publisher behind him. I'm fortunate to have that. And I love that idea. And so I remember, I won't say who, but some of the, teachers and stuff that I would talk to, or artists I would talk to about it. And they're like, that's a terrible idea. Abandon it. But the one guy who thought it was a good idea was Joe Kubert. And I was like, well, I guess that blows all the other opinions out of the water. He was like, I remember talking to him about it once, this concept, and he's like, sure, yeah, you should do it. That sounds great. Which I'm like, God damn, yeah, Joe's the best, man. Of course. All right.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I had no idea how I was going to do it. And I didn't even know if I was. But, and then when I was interning at Heliscope, I drew a couple pages. I actually drew the first page while I was there. So that's how long I've been picking at this book. And and I remember I was kind of like, oh, there's something here. And so I worked out like kind of the first like scene that you see in the previews. And then I just pitched it around for several years to, just have people. Oh man, I had so many artists told me, and writers told me that this was a terrible idea. The only guy who was like 100% like, this is awesome, Steve Lieber. Because I think, in my opinion, I think Steve is going to be the next Joe Kubert. He's taking up that role, that mantle in the universe.
He's got the sage-like wisdom. He
does. He is like the greatest.
Although he's kind of passed his mantle on to Jesse Ham, it seems. At least because he used to do that. Was Steve that did that column for like Comiccon.com, right? and then Jesse Ham's doing that. Well, Steve's obviously still like the patriarch of the comic community.
I just mean that, like, Steve's like one of the probably the greatest ambassadors for young talent that I've ever seen, besides maybe Joe. And I don't know. I don't know if it's just him, like his personality, or just his love for the art. But like, I love that he's not just thinking. Like I've worked with other older artists who have no intention of like
spreading the wealth.
Yeah, or passing the mantle, or making sure that the next generation gets to learn from their mistakes or to help them along. I've worked with older artists who are very much like, yeah, fuck you, kid. Like, I'm gonna ride this horse till it dies, and there's no way I'm gonna help you out.
Every time at Emerald City, I stop by Steve's table, and he always tells me to check out somebody else's stuff at Heliscope. Yeah. Like last year, he told me to check out Maria France, who is from Fairbanks.
Yep.
And
there you go, another young artist just had her first graphic novel come out,
which is awesome.
Yep.
Yeah. So Cretaceous. Okay. You shopped it around for a bit.
I shopped it around.
I have to ask.
Okay.
Why no Jungle Babes?
Oh, motherfucker. One of the
That's not me actually suggesting that. He got a note from a publisher about Jungle Babes.
Yeah, I think it was the first time I'd been to Stumptown. Remember when they used to do Stumptown Comic Con in Portland before it became Rose City? Mm-hmm. And there was a guy there. Man, I so badly want to call him out.
No name names.
Okay, there was an artist there who has a very popular, semi-popular creator-owned project, and I remember showing the concept to him, and he was like, no one's gonna read this. And his thing is like, I like his property, but it's kind of a ripoff of a very famous property that already exists from the 80s of A Mutant Kind. And and he was like, hey, your work's all right, kid, but he's like, it's boring. Like, no one's gonna read this. You gotta like punch it up. You gotta throw some Jungle Babes or something in there. And luckily, I'm sitting here taking it, because that's what I did at this time. I just take it right on the chin, like, just heap it on, you old man. And he said nothing constructive, was just mean. And then luckily my sister, she's watching this all go down. She walks up and she's seen what he's doing. And she's not familiar with it, but she immediately makes a connection, and she's like, "Oh, this just looks like a big ripoff of so and so," which at the time was actually being published by the same publisher, and he just, and then my sister just walked away like she didn't know either of us.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I was like, God, my sister's an animal. I love her because she takes no shit, and at that point he was like, "Here you go," like he was just, and so he just was done. Like he had to go like look at himself in the mirror after that. But no, I was at Jet City, and Dan Brereton, I think that's how you say his last name. I always just call him Dan. Mm-hmm. He did like Nocturnals and stuff. He saw it and gave me a nice portfolio review, and he was like, let me pass this around. I want to show this to some people. So he took it and sent it to, I think it was, I want to say, was it Walt Simonson? Somebody like that.
Wow.
Or somebody, and then like that went down to like somebody looked at it at Disney, and I got great feedback, but everyone was like, what do you want us to do with this? Are you just showing this to us? Are you looking for a writer? Because nobody wanted a silent. Everybody wanted dialogue with it. So everybody was like, are you looking for a narrator? And so I had some people suggest like a guy who used to do some writing for Mark Schultz, who's a paleontologist, and I talked to him. Nice guy, but his ideas I was not into. He just wasn't grasping what I was going for.
That's a really important note. Cretaceous is actually entirely silent. There's no dialogue. There's no Land Before Time. No. Three Horns Don't Hang Out with Long Necks type stuff going on.
I never liked that stuff as a kid, and I don't.
Did you ever consider having some sort of narration or?
No. I wanted, like, when I was a kid, when Jurassic Park came out, I remember watching Jurassic Park and going, God, wouldn't it be great if Steven and the boys made a sequel, but it was just a National Geographic documentary to like classical music, and it was just all CGI of just the dinosaurs living their lives on the island 10 years after. And that was like when I was like 9. I always wanted to see that. And then once I got into, comics, I was like, oh,
I can make this.
Oh fuck, I can make this.
Yeah.
I can make this. I can do this. And then later I found out there's actually a gentleman who's already done that, made a prosperous career for himself doing that. What's his name? Ricardo Delgado, Age of Reptiles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so he'd been doing it. And I was like, okay, I'm not even going to look at what he did because I don't want to have any risk that I'm copying his story or picking up on ways he treats certain animals as characters. And I strictly just stuck to my guns with, I still haven't read his stuff. I'm sure it's fantastic. I've seen art, but I haven't actually sat down and read the book just because I don't want to accidentally
you don't want to like subconsciously like steal something or use something that he used or anything.
Right. Kind of like how like comedians don't go and watch other comics to stand up because then they might accidentally subconsciously start
like,
using
that bit in my brain. I'm going to use it.
Yeah. You don't even mean to. You just like, oh, that was a funny bit. And then 2 years later you end up using it. But yeah, so what was the question?
We were just kind of just generally talking about we were talking about the silence.
Silence.
And then we were also talking about how, generally speaking, how did it end up at Oni? Because it sounds like it kind of touched on some people, but
yeah. So like Disney looked at it. Marvel actually had some editors from Marvel give it a really hard look over.
Interesting.
And they were like, it was funny too because they said great things. I mean, I only had a few pages.
Could be in this?
No, they were just like, they just told me straight up. They're like, oh, we don't publish this kind of stuff. So, but we're just going to look at it because this is cool.
Yeah.
That was like what they told me. And then they, kind of gave me some people maybe I should seek out, which I did. Nothing came of it. And then Steve, again, goes back to Steve, man. Steve connected me with Charlie.
Charlie Chu?
Charlie Chu over at Oni. And Charlie seemed to be somewhat interested. And so him and I had a series of meetings over the course of a couple years, kind of hashing it out and just seeing where, if it was a possibility. And I finally just was like, I sent him a colored page. I think I'd drawn up to like page maybe 20, 22. And I was like, God damn it. I want to have this contract signed and like he'd worked out like what it could be. But he was like, I don't know what it's going to take to get over the hump. And so I was like, fuck it. So I just sent him one page. It was fully finished. Like this is what it'll look like in print. And like 15 minutes later, he sent me over a contract.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I sent it over to the lawyer, got it. She looked at it, told me, broke it down what I was looking at. It's pretty standard. So, and the deal was, for what Oni could do, it was a really, really good contract. So
that's great.
Yeah. So then it was, I finished the script, and then I took the next, I think 2.5 years to finish it. I would have loved to just drop everything and do it, but my wife at the time was in school, and so I was the only one working, only one making money. So that, and then at that time, that's when I started getting the cover. I did some work on Godzilla and I did turtle stuff and, storyboards here and there. So,
and that's where the long nights come in.
Yeah. And that's where the long nights.
So what, there was a lot of work that went into the pages, but what was like the research phase like? Because I'm not going to lie. I did not know that Tyrannosaurus Rex children look like that. Like, we
don't technically.
It's like a hypothesis about how the feathers would be integrated because that's one of there's been a lot of
huge debate
evolution in our understanding of dinosaurs over recent years. And so it's interesting because it's one of the first places I've ever seen things like, there was like the kind of raptor type creature or dinosaurs that are in there, and they're like straight up feathers coming off their arms. Oh yeah. And when I was reading that, I was just like, I have never seen a dinosaur that looked like this. It looked awesome. Yeah. But at the same time, it was interesting. So what went into that?
So once I started going in where I was like writing it, and I started trying to update myself because I was still in that kind of Jurassic Park mode.
Yeah.
Where like that's what I kind of thought the image of dinosaurs was. Even though I've always been a huge like dinosaur fan, I've been focused on like school and trying to just make people even aware that I'm breathing in the comic industry. So dinosaurs were like way in the back. And then once it became a reality, I started trying to get my hands on most of the recent literature and seeing what other paleo artists were doing. And that's when I was like, oh shit, everything's got feathers now.
Yeah.
And then
It's a good look.
it looks great. And the fossils, the one thing I wanted to set for the book, and I'm sure there's some paleontologists that'll rip me up, because it one of those things where like I started becoming way more knowledgeable about the halfway point in the book. That's when I was like pretty solid on a lot of my dinosaur physiology. So while I was making the book, it was a big learning curve. You always see dinosaurs like this with their hands pointed at the ground.
He is doing like the traditional velociraptor,
right?
Like I'm on the hunt, hands down, claws down thing.
That's bad anatomy. Yeah, which
they're not just running around like a goofy Godzilla or something.
Yeah, it's the saying is clappers, not flappers. So their hands are like forward.
Oh, okay.
So like if you look at like a bird skeleton, like where the way their wings are positioned, same thing. Their hands aren't curved down; their hands are curved out because they're they move their wings from their shoulder, not from their hands. There's all these things that I learned that I kind of was like, why did they get this wrong in Jurassic Park? Like this, they knew the science was there. This was easy stuff. And then what I tried to do, the biggest thing is I tried to create the animals to be in an ecological niche that we would see today.
Right.
So I was like, okay, we're picking a region.
It was in like Cascadia, right?
Yeah, basically we're like in North America, so like basically like Alberta, Canada, Montana, that region.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, we have T-Rex. Okay, I'm gonna have to kind of mimic that off of like bears, but they're gonna be it's gonna be a bit more family oriented. So it's like bears and eagles, that kind of.
Right.
That's who I'm gonna be looking at. Like for some of the smaller like raptors that we've got in there. I'm looking at like wolves, coyotes, those kind of things, just to see, because we don't even know if they operated in packs. We don't know. We don't really. There's some evidence for like the family units for the T-Rexes. There's a whole bunch of different things that I had to look at, and the big thing is I just wanted everything to seem feasible and real, like somewhat realistic. Like it's not so much ridiculous that an animal would do this. Like the actions have to be justified by the constraints of their environment and the niche that they occupy.
Right.
If that makes sense.
No, totally. The thing that really impressed me about the book, and I told you this beforehand, was, one of the interesting things about doing a silent comic is it really relies upon the reader to interpret it in their own way. Right. And it's like, that could lead to a variable experience. But for me, like the thing that really got me was how visceral my reactions were to the plight of these characters or these creatures. Good. I mean, I don't know if you call them characters or creatures or what, but
I just call them animals.
Yeah, animals.
I just refer to them as animals, which always throws people off because you mean dinosaurs? Like, well, yeah, they're animals.
Right. But I mean, like there is some real emotional connections you make to these, especially for me, as like I was saying, like as a pet owner, you read this and it's just like there's like a palpable like. This is Triceratops that I just like, it just kills me, man. And like I was reading that and I was just like, I'm going to text Tadd and call him a dick because I'm upset reading this comic. But I mean, like that's good though, because you're generating a visceral reaction in a reader without like verbal cues. Like you're doing it strictly through your art and through the story that you're conveying in the arc of these animals.
Right.
And I don't know. I mean, like that I thought was really interesting because like I said, it leaves a lot to the reader, but I think in a lot of ways that makes it a more rewarding experience.
Okay. Yeah. No, thanks, man. That's awesome. I always found that for me, what makes a good comic, not saying that my comic is amazing, but what makes a good comic is, can I read the book without having to read the dialogue?
Right.
There's details that are going to be left out. But if you can't read a book, just whatever, the monthly floppy that's on the shelf, if you can't read that from page 1 to page 22 and get an idea of what the story is, the storytelling is weak. The body language of the characters is suffering. And, it's hard to do in any book. And that was one of the things that I really wanted to showcase. I really wanted to make sure that you could invest in these animals as characters. Now, the dimensions of how you characterize that animal might be a little bit different than like, you know, you were saying that the T-Rex is a dad, where
Well,
a friend of
where
mine's
it's up to interpretation.
right, where like a friend of mine's daughter, it was all mom.
Right.
It was the mom
Totally,
show.
yeah.
Which I was like, you know, it's one of those where I was like, oh wow, I gotta really run with that.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, you know, it's all about showing like body language and just how how things react in their environment can be way more powerful than like the most dramatic dialogue ever.
Right.
And
Well, and one other thing I really liked about it is like you use things like sound effects for kind of callbacks to things earlier. Like, so maybe I'm reading too much into this, but in the beginning, when the T-Rex is engaging with their family, they're like making like, I think it was like a chirp sound or something like that.
Yeah, they're like chirping. Of
Yeah,
some
yeah.
kind, yeah.
But then when the little T-Rex is trying to find his family, he hears the same sound. It's the same sound effect.
Right.
And it calls back, but it's actually a predator calling that to like basically. And it was really fascinating because I was just like, wow, that's actually really clever just sound effect storytelling, because like it was using the same sound that a T-Rex would to speak to their young, but really it was a predator being like, get in my trap, I'm gonna kill you and eat you.
Right, and that really wasn't even like, from a story standpoint, that's exactly what I was going for, but that wasn't something that was hard to write because I'd already found the niche was those small predators that lured the young T-Rex in.
Right.
They're coyotes, and if you've ever watched coyotes operate, especially with dogs, at least where I grew up, they'd come out. They'd act a little weird, get a feel for the dog. If the dog was over playful, they'd be like, oh, hey, let's play.
Right.
All of a sudden, they're playing further and further away. Now they're out of sight.
Right.
Your dog doesn't come back because it's getting ganged up by the rest of the pack. So I wanted to try and utilize this, you know, basically the habits and the skill set that these animals could, I guess, and like have.
Right. But I mean, that was like the sound effect thing. I mean, I don't remember exactly how many pages it was, but maybe like a 70 to 100 page gap between those sound effects. Yeah. And it was like, it was nice. It was nice. It was a nice callback to the sound effect.
What do they call it? There's a special like literary term.
I don't remember what it is. I know what you're talking about though.
I can never remember.
If I was good at this, I would actually remember it.
If it was more sophisticated.
If only. Yeah. So last question on Cretaceous, I want to, actually second to last. How did you find a through line? Like the through line is important, like having something to connect the readers through this story, because it could have meandered. It could have just been a tour of dinosaurs. Like how important was it to find that?
I really wanted to have a familiar face, and everybody knows. Even it doesn't matter who you are. Everybody knows what a T-Rex is. Your mom knows what a T-Rex is. Your little brother does. Everybody. So I wanted to make sure that we established that there is one main narrative. And then I was like, okay, I want to jump from, I guess, scene to scene, but I want it to be like, I need to pass time because I don't want it to just be where we're following this animal. And the easiest thing is I started watching like old National Geographic documentaries, and whenever they would have like a main animal, say it's like a mountain lion's the main character, then they jump off and do like a little side story with like a badger,
and the pelican is so yeah,
and somehow that would connect back in because it'd all be operating within this region that the main animal or the main character is in.
Is exactly what those shows always do.
That's exactly what they do. It's actually very, and you know who does it really a lot early in his career and actually made his career doing it was Tarantino. If you've ever seen whatchamacallit, not
Pulp Fiction?
Yeah, Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
Pulp Fiction is like,
it's all callbacks.
That's what the whole movie is.
Yeah.
But he's got that one kind of main character, or a couple main characters that they kind of kick the movie off, but then they all connect at the very end. And there's all these other side plots that involve different characters, but they're all somehow interconnected. And, I didn't do it nearly as complex as like Tarantino does in some of his films because it's Tarantino.
Right.
But I tried to kind of use that as like, oh, that's a really great baseline for a movie, or for a story. Like that's a great way of introducing new and familiar characters all while telling one singular story.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask you the most terrible question you can ask a person who made a silent comic about dinosaurs.
Okay.
How do you build an audience for that?
This was actually a lot of my pitch meetings.
Yeah.
Went this way is, who the heck's going to read this? Like, what do you, like, my whole thing was just like,
It's something you're passionate about and you want to do.
yeah, and then everybody likes dinosaurs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very rare. I mean, maybe if you might not have a special place for them in your heart, but you're aware of what they are.
Right.
So, I don't think it'll be too difficult.
Right.
I think, yeah, that and I like dinosaurs. I mean, like if you told me I got to do this for the next like 10, 15 years, all right.
Yeah.
I'm sold.
It is just interesting because, I mean, the market is always tough. I mean, I was telling you beforehand, like our local comic book shop like didn't order like 2 trades I really wanted to get, and they were pretty prominent books. Not saying that's not going to happen in Cretaceous, but at the same time, and it's a weird place to be in. And granted, you're doing things like this. I read other interviews you did like with Sci-Fi Wire and things like that.
It's all a matter of spreading the word. Well, it sounded kind of religious. And that has been
about my
something.
Lord and Savior, Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Have you heard of the good book Cretaceous, ladies and gentlemen? That's one thing that has been, kind of worrying me is because I had a librarian on NetGalley.
I think libraries would be good for you.
Yeah. That's I had a NetGalley early review. She was like, she gave a great review, and then she goes, "My only worry is that people are going to be unaware that this book exists." And I was like,
"That's tough."
I was like, "Oh, I think that's the big thing for anything, unless you've got, you've got somebody who's investing tons and tons of money in, advertising your film or your book or your song." It's one of those things like someone might not discover it until 2 or 3 years after it's come out.
Right.
So I'm really hoping that, we get a decent coverage here domestically. I really think a book like this would be not more appreciated, but might get a little bit more length out of it in, like, say, the Asian market. Dinosaurs do really well over there. They take dinosaurs very seriously. If you just look at like how their museums, and especially it's like right now is like the golden age for paleontology, and most of that stuff's coming out of China. So
and not a lot of translation needed.
And that's one of the big things is like I've actually been pressuring the publisher, like
foreign licensing.
We don't have to spend any money in translating. Can we get this in Europe?
Right.
Italy, France.
Man, that would look really good, like an oversized like album style.
Oh man,
ooh, that'd be amazing.
Awesome. And like mainland China. I'd love to get this in like China, Asia.
Right.
Anywhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would do really. I think it could get a little bit more.
Yeah.
Whatever out of it.
Sure.
But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. This is all kind of new to me. I've always been just doing like, you fill in, you do like a
You've been doing
mini-series.
other people's work. This is your baby.
Right. Yeah. This is my first like kind of rodeo. And the only times I've ever attempted to do anything like this, I just, it was like a web comic or something. You just put it out there and people want it. They find it great, but you don't have any high hopes or there's no implications for it.
Well, and it's tough because like, not only are you the creator, but you also have like a certain level of like, I have to promote this and I have to get the word out. And it's like that's tough. It's like I've talked to, Eric Stevenson at Image, like the dude who runs that. Yeah. And he tells me, he told me before, he's just like, not everybody's cut out for this because it's not just making a comic, it's promoting it. It's making decisions that are like, involving production and how you're going to make it look and yada, yada, yada. And that's some people just like doing the work.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was, I haven't quite figured out if I want to be involved in all that stuff. I don't know if I'm good at it or if I'm easy to work with. I just don't know. Like I tried to be involved. If there was something I didn't like that, like when we were working out the cover, there was a lot of suggestions after I got the art approved. They wanted to do a bunch of things from a design sense that I was like, no. This it just didn't make any sense. Especially like I kept saying, I was like, I don't need the cover to be terribly complex. The inside is nothing but art driven. So I want the cover to be kind of simplistic, like, single image. You saw it, there's not a lot going on the cover. It's pretty simple. It's fairly simple. And then all the other stuff, like, I just actually got off I just emailed with Charlie over at Oni, and I was like, because they're doing board games. So I'm like, I don't know if it's even in the cards, but
Yeah.
let's do an RPG Cretaceous game. Like, come on, man. Like, it's educational. It's cool because it's dinosaurs. Like, people get to be different characters. Like, let's do that. And they're like, all right, slow down. The book hasn't come out yet, man. Slow
One
down.
step at a time.
Yeah, heck, I even look at like, I've been reading up on like, the Ninja Turtles line and some of that stuff. And I look at that and I go, God, there's really no cool, like American based. There's one like small dinosaur line of toys that comes out of New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like one guy who does everything, and he has to kickstart all of these things and they look great. They're awesome. But I'm sitting there going like, man, how great would it be if we could get like NECA or Mezco or one of these badass toy companies to come in and do like a limited run, like little limited run of like T-Rexes that are like, 12 inches by 6 inches tall, like how cool would that be, just to go with the book. But I guess to get that kind of stuff, you got to sell, you got to sell copies. But I was like, I was already like throwing that out there at Oni and they're like, all right, man, like you need to relax. Like, maybe once you get like a couple volumes under your belt, we can get that. But I'm like, come on, let's just go for it now. Why not? There's no, I see nothing but positives and potential.
Yeah.
And I think that's how you have to be, because the worst thing that anybody's going to say is no or slow down.
Right.
That's
I'd rather have more ideas and them get rejected than have no ideas.
Yeah, I'd rather have people tell me no and close the door than me not even knocking. And just sitting back going like, well, maybe it could have happened, but I don't know,
Yeah.
You don't know until you ask. You never know. Just like, with breaking into the comics, if you don't like produce work and go show it to people, you could be the best artist on the planet, but if nobody knows you are alive,
Keeping it a secret is not exactly a good way to get jobs.
No, not at all.
So last question, not Cretaceous related. We're in Anchorage, Alaska, a glorious metropolis known for its comic book community.
Yes.
That is a lie. It is not known for its comic book community. There's not a lot of people in comics up here.
No.
How does that affect you? Does that affect you? Or is like kind of the decentralized nature of the industry because of the internet, is that something that works for you?
It doesn't, I want to say it affects me, but I don't think it really does. I'm going to be honest. I've always kind of felt like a bit of an outsider in the comic industry.
And you moved to Alaska to really confirm it?
Pretty much. Like, like as great as Portland was, I never quite fit in with that vibe. Like I never hung out with any of the other artists or the writers.
That happens.
I don't play video games and I don't do any of that kind of stuff really. I don't even really like drinking. I'm kind of boring. So yeah, it's just one of those like, I don't know. Some people, I think if you're one of those guys that you need to be like surrounded by artists and that's what you need for motivation, then by all means, definitely move to like New York or Portland or
Los Angeles,
someplace where you're just surrounded by art. But if you're a professional artist, man, like that whole concept of like motivation, like it's your job. Like you gotta show up.
So it doesn't matter for getting the work or doing the work though.
No, not really.
It seems like you've been
I've never
as active as before.
I've been more active. I've probably been busier since living up here, and even like all my mainstream gigs, especially in the last 2 years. I've never met anybody at IDW. I've never met anyone.
And you've done several projects for them.
Yeah, and I've been doing work with them for like the last 3-4 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So. That tells you right there. Most of the people that you work with, you never meet.
I do think that there's like some I don't know if it's misconceptions, but it's like some people think that you got to go to art school and you got to live in a place where the industry is and yada, yada, yada. And I don't know if necessarily either of those
I
are
call
true.
Bullshit on all that.
Yeah.
I call even though I'm like, I did both those things. I went to art school and then I went to Portland to like do an internship and be surrounded by artists because I knew nothing about the industry, and that I figured that was the only way I was going to get into it.
I think there's value there, but I don't know if it's essential. It's certainly not.
I think that if I was never a tech savvy person. I didn't grow up like that wasn't something where like kids now, it wasn't like when we were hell, even when we were in college, you couldn't just like jump on Instagram and connect with like.
Well, Instagram didn't exist.
That's what I mean. Like you couldn't jump on there and just connect with like every working artist in the industry,
Right.
where you can do that in like an hour now.
Right.
And you can actually have conversations with them and show them your work, and you can see their work and see their process. Where like we didn't have any of that type of stuff. You had to like. You either had to find a book or you had to find like another artist to show you how to do it. And like, let's face it, comic industry is very protective, very insulated, very kind of secretive. Like, you know, the whole backgrounding, like ghosting thing, like that's old school, man. Like most people don't know about that.
No.
Heck, I'm doing it right now. And
I do think though that there is, as insular as it can be, there's always ways in. And like look at like so there was this
Twitter, man.
there was an artist who basically was just the biggest fan in the world of Shazam, Captain Marvel, the DC character.
Okay.
And did a ton of fan art. Near as I can tell, she got a backup job for the new Shazam book that DC did, just because everyone was like, wow, you're really good at this stuff. And she was fantastic. I think it was like Maya Sin Naito or Saito or something like that. And she, oh my God, like I loved her stuff. And it's funny because she was just Instagram famous for doing that. She may have been a successful artist in other regards, so I don't want to diminish her other work.
Sure.
But at the same time, that was a thing that she was known for.
That's how you get work nowadays.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily like.
I will say it wasn't just like she wasn't just pinups. Like her storytelling was on point.
Right.
It's good stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what they look for. Ultimately, I think if you're making comics and it's going up online, like the comic book, I'd say the culture for comics exists mostly online because there's not a lot of places for us in the.
Besides comic shops, it's like comic shops and
comic shops and the occasional convention. If if you're not traveling, then if you're lucky, you might get one a year that comes to your city. So like, okay, those are like two things that you get in your region. So, but you can do it every single day online, and I guess I don't really view it as a bad, but like, it's a nerd based culture. So like, we're all on like the internet, you know what I mean? Like we're all on Twitter, we're all on Instagram, we're all in Facebook groups, we're all talking. So I don't like, I tell kids like, there's YouTube now. There's tutorials on how to do perspective. There's tutorials
you
on
can
how
watch
to
your
do
favorite artist on Twitch drawing your favorite character. You can learn from that.
Need to go to, like, it sounds terrible because I'm such a hypocrite, but I tell kids like, if you're really motivated, and I even tell parents this because art school is ridiculously fucking expensive, and a lot of times you don't walk away with a bachelor's degree, you walk away with a certificate. Which, not to knock the Kubert School, it's awesome, but like, say what you will about a bachelor's, it doesn't exactly hold the same kind of weight it used to.
Right.
So like, the Kubert School's great. Like, it's awesome. If you can afford it, go just for the experience. You get to work with like, other professionals and stuff like that.
Good way to meet people.
It's a great way to network. Yeah, like I still keep in touch with a lot of the guys I went to school with, and a lot of them are working, in the industry. Like I sat next to Tamara Bonvillian.
Mm-hmm.
Her and I sat next to each other for what, 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
She taught me how to flat. And would correct all my flats when I'd fuck them up. Thanks, Tamara. But I mean, like I haven't seen. She lives in Georgia. I haven't seen her in almost a decade, but I still talk to her all the time just on the internet. Yeah. So, and most of the people that I've worked with, I've never even met. It's all just through email and, Twitter and all those type of exchanges.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like the world is smaller for artists, and it's like where you are is less important. Like I'm pals with a lot of people from Ireland, and like Ireland has a huge comic book community.
Oh, really?
And they have like great success with it because it's you can work from everywhere. Granted, they work their asses off, they hustle, and they do great things. But it does. I largely think that whether you're in Alaska or Ireland or New York or Portland or wherever, there's opportunity if you work at it and if you show you can do it.
Sure. Look at how much talent's coming out of like the Philippines and Malaysia.
Right.
I mean,
a lot of that's on Will Portacio. I mean, he did a lot to make art a very big thing there. I think he has like a school there.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. But I mean, you go look at the Marvel roster. There's tons of people working all over the world. those people aren't coming to the States to like go to a convention in like Kansas to go meet their favorite editor to try and get a job.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they're drawing their asses off, sending the work in. Someone at Marvel or DC or wherever is seeing it going, oh, these kids can draw.
Yeah.
All right, you got a job. Here you go.
Yeah.
Knock it out of the park and we'll give you some more.
Yeah.
You know, I mean that, yeah, like you said, the world's really small. It's crazy because I feel like when I was coming, like I was at like guys our age when we were coming through college, we were in that weird transitionary period where Facebook was brand new and all this other stuff. And you're like looking at it like, I guess it's got potential. It's kind of cool, whatever. And now you see
It's
like,
everything.
Yeah. We're like, when I went to the Kubert School, you know, there's people still FedExing their pages. Like they're to the editorial for them to FedEx them to an inker. And then those pages to be FedExed back to the editor who then FedEx them back to the original penciler.
Right.
You know, where now it's like, oh yeah, no, I'm
Scan,
just,
send.
or they just draw it,
Right.
you know, on their whatever their new Apple pad, or
iPad
something.
Pro.
iPad Pro. I don't use any of that stuff, and then they email it off, and it's it's done.
Yeah.
You know, and that's it. And nobody like. I mean, it's almost even eliminated kind of like it used to be a very like regimented chain of assembly.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where you had your.
Now you can kind of piecemeal it.
Oh yeah, you can just. I mean, you can do it. I mean, you can do everything yourself if you want.
Yeah.
You know, like I mean,
Which you did.
Yeah,
With Cretaceous.
with Cretaceous, yeah. I mean, I did pretty much everything.
Your writing was incredible.
Thank you, man. See, I'll take it. Take it.
All right, Ted. That's all I have for you. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
for
thanks,
coming
dude.
on.
This was awesome.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with cartoonist Tadd Galusha. You can find him on Twitter at Tadd Galusha, on his website at taddgalusha.com, and in his upcoming Oni Press graphic novel Cretaceous, which arrives in comic shops everywhere March 13th. If you're a fan of Off Panel, make sure to check it out on Patreon. If you back the show on there, you not only support it, but you get early access to each week's podcast, access to exclusive written and audio content, and more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes or Stitcher and give the show a rating or review while you're at it. You can find it on social media by liking it on Facebook at /sketched, that's SKTCHD, following it on Twitter at sketchcomic, or following me at @SlicedFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Sean Kirkham, Harry Small, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Greg Peterson, Gus, Andrew Scott, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Johan Brander, Paul Ryanwan, Connor Farner, Vita Ayala, JDC and Matt Gagnon, Aditya Bidikar, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, Kieran Mark Antonio, WMQ Comics, Akil, Greg Lockhart, Kokachi, Phil White, Ben Becker, Sean Pinello, Kent Heidelman, Philip Sevi, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, Nick Michelin, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Paletto, Dylan Campbell, Owen McCready, Brendan Fletcher, Gary Maloney, Jonathan Nielsen, Matthew Groom, Jason Nassy, Adam Bogert, Xavier Files, Maria Schweitzer, Matthew Taylor, Tyler Turner, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Brawley, Evan Blazer, Brian McRae, Ira James Udaskin, Modern Magic Stories, Nick Hall, Brenda Batista, Bobby Angus, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Phil Nall, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Chipper, Carl McMahon, Chris Palmer, Maxwell Schmidt, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Lou Iovino, Nicholas Gaslight, Greg Rucka, Adam Highfield, Nicholas Gardner, Andrew Corrigan, Fiona Staples, Chris Morris, Chris O'Halloran, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim DiMonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to the band Wolfpack, whose excellent track Outro from their album Volmilch opens the show. Give them a listen as they're totally rad. Thanks for listening and tune in next week for another episode.